Thank you so much. And it's so good to be with you today on this virtual forum. We're spending part of the afternoon talking about all manner of things connected TV. I'm James O'Brien. I'm the president of Custom here at Digiday Media. We're the in-house agency that's been working with Mountain now for well over a year, digging into what has been a remarkable evolution. Think about how much things have changed, audience and guests, just since the last time we got together for a forum like this on this topic. When we've seen Netflix enter the fray and say advertising, yes, to an extent, yes, and Disney Plus and HBO Max. I mean, these are massive flagship opportunities to reach audiences for any advertiser, and connected TV has been right there on that envelope, a game changer for advertising. So marketers are working in a world of targeted creative, yes, multi-touch attribution and omnichannel tactics, except now a huge array of new channels and approaches and device moments are happening because of the connected TV surge. So we're joined today by Marwan Soghaier, who's the Chief Product Officer at Mountain. We're going to talk about some of these vital strategies emerging and already entrenched in some cases that marketers are using to succeed with CTV, from topics about boosting engagement across all these channels to optimizing your creative strategy by device type. We're going to go looking together for some of the steps that uncover opportunities, evident and hidden, unlocking CTV's true potential. So welcome with me, if you would please, Mr. Marwan Soghaier, who's the Chief Product Officer at Mountain. Marwan, I'm so glad you're here. I hope things to you look as rosy as they look to me. Am I seeing the world through a particularly tinted pair of glasses, or are things
No,
with CTV?
no, I think you're right. It's good to be here, James. Thank you, and thanks for asking that question because this area of the market, this sector of the market, is definitely rosy, and it's exploding with opportunity, both from a technology standpoint and from an accessibility standpoint to advertisers. So it's what gets me out of bed every morning.
Right on. And
For
I'm
sure.
sure that one of the things that keeps you up in the meantime
Is
is that
delivering it.
yes. So all
Yeah.
of this,
Yeah.
support for advertising on
Yeah.
CTV is certainly an opportunity, but it must mean that advertisers are banging on the door saying, we need more creative. We need to be more creative in a faster way. We need
Yeah.
to make it more dynamic. We need to do
Yeah.
things with it to keep up with that demand. So what are you
Mhm.
seeing out there? Let's start
Mhm.
there.
Mhm.
How
Well,
are brands?
sure, sure. I mean, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that are going on right now, as you know, in years past, and even up to the current. The idea that you could generate a lot of video ads or television ads is not the same set of challenges as generating a lot of rich media for the display advertising channel. And so as we step into connected television and there's this proliferation of people diving into connected television advertise, that is the number one question brands are asking themselves right now, because the mindset and the mentality of most brands is television is a premium advertising channel, and to deliver well and to get the engagement you would expect from a video ad, you would have to produce something that has a relatively high, and this is always subjective, because we know there's bad ads out there, but a relatively high level of quality. And the concept of the video production process, which is very different than the concept of the rich media display ad production process, whereby you can now use template publishers, which we actually have on our own platform at Mountain, to generate a display ad, very quickly swap out your logo and pump in some dynamic products and get it moving. Television ad is not that animal. The television ad is something that oftentimes moves into having very elegant voiceover, background music, original score, talent, so acting talent, and it involves scripting, and it involves delivering almost a storyline and a message and a vision to the audience member that really reaches as deep as possible into the viewer's heart, to pull those strings, to get some engagement and connect the brand to the viewers. And so those cycles are not the same for television as they are for display. So there's a lot of things that have come along. So, and to kind of wrap this into a nutshell, we're seeing the advent of AI, meaning we have engines now that can actually monitor metadata sources and the television programming itself, and determine the viewership and the viewer behavior, and actually make suggestions and recommendations on what types of stock video, music, wording, language could even be applied to a video ad. You also have the advent of crowdsourcing video production, which now takes the concept of Uber, where somebody's ready to spend some time using their own car to move you around to make some money, and moves the sort of like video production economy, if you will, into that same space that Uber's in, where you have organizations like one that we have recently merged with that actually allows you to very quickly go from conceptual and ideation type mode into video production mode, so you can get your creative quicker. Okay, but the question to be solved is, at what cost? Certain brands can't afford to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for very premium, almost epic movie style ads, like the Burberry type ads that you would see in movie theaters. And many need a way to very quickly move into video production and video creative. We can do this literally by tiering out what their specific needs are. So crowdsourcing addresses some of that. The other thing that addresses it more so is, if you look at the shelf life of a video ad, most people get into video production realizing that that video ad that they've just produced for their brand, that premium video ad, may only have a shelf life of about 45 days, maybe 60 days, at best 90 days if it's a branded ad that gets shown over and over again. And now with technologies coming full circle, like making ads contextual, and driving contextual, using contextual engines to drive contextual ads into existing television ads, or existing product ads into existing television ads. You now take an existing ad that before could have played as a branding ad and turn that into something that has a lot more shelf life. So you're not, as a brand, going out back into your video production cycles and utilizing creative for a longer period of time, month over month over month. So you're effectively extending its shelf life. You could call it a preservative of sorts, but it's a very tasty preservative, not one that's bad for you. So it does increase the shelf life tremendously for brands, and gives brands really in the favor of smaller advertisers that before thought they couldn't be playing in the television advertising arena, now gives them access to that game. And so those types of technologies are really pushing it forward to enable volume creative for the opportunity itself.
I mean, as you say this, Marwan, I mean, what a wealth of ideas and info just in that one thread that we followed here. And it occurs to me that one of the things that you're saying, I believe, is that, volume and speed isn't the same as quality and longevity. And yet quality is getting better at volume and speed and longevity over time, because technology is allowing us to do something to it. And you brought up the word contextual. And I wonder if you can talk about that dynamic for a bit. So when we think about ways, and the title of our session has the word innovation in it, so let's go there. When we think about innovation, when we think about where teams are innovating and examples you've seen of innovation at work, you mentioned a contextual engine. If I'm a marketer, I'll raise my hand. I want one of those. Can I have one of those contextual engines immediately, please? What is it in your mind? What is that model? How does it work? Take as far as you can into how it works based on your experience, and maybe an example of what we mean when we say that we're extending the shelf life, we're changing things a bit so that we can work faster but also closer to our audiences.
Well, there really aren't, playing the innovation track here and having this conversation, there really aren't any really great examples of contextual engines that are generating television ads right now.
How can that be?
It's technology that's coming on board. Television ads are built, they're produced by individuals that use video editing tools, and they are compiled and sent into networks for programmatic advertising where that's possible. Not all inventory is programmatic, as you know, and so there's many companies that are working on this right now, and we're one of them. And so I think without going too far down the rabbit hole and exposing all our little secrets about what we're building and whatnot, how a contextual engine would effectively work is it would understand the kinds of behaviors that the audience that the marketer is trying to target has exhibited already on their existing website, and bake in the types of product recommendations that that individual would want to see while they're watching their television ad. And so that this should all happen in an automated fashion without literally hands getting on a video, sending it back to an edit bay to somebody to literally recompile a video to provide that video to a network. And it should happen on the fly. So as user behaviors and a bucket of audience members that you're targeting actually changes, so do your television ads. And that's probably as far as I'll actually want to go to explain this without getting into any trade secrets.
Well, I won't ask you for any trade sequence, but I'll ask you for a timeline. So, I wouldn't say I'm shocked that there isn't something like this out there working right now, but I'm surprised at how manual it still sounds. Am I overstating the case there? And
No, you're absolutely. It's. I don't believe you're overstating it at all. I mean, we're not quite. We're right now at the cusp, and I'm sure as we enter Cannes, I'm sure that the technology sector will be showcasing AI as well. On the creative side of things, but you're in a world right now where there is already AI that is effectively able to connect with, for instance, content that's happening in programming and providing suggested content recommendations as well as actually rendering creative. So there's creative engines out there that are working very hard at figuring out how to literally produce video content without any human hands. And as you know, CGI has already reached that point where sometimes, depending on the budget on the CGI, it's very difficult to discern reality from CGI. So there are things that are in play already right now that have started in the world of entertaining and animation and whatnot that will easily and quickly find their way into the world of advertising, I feel. So to say that there's nothing out there would not be accurate. To say that the technology hasn't been fully commercialized in the world of advertising would be, I think, more accurate.
Are we talking about 2023 as a moment when we might look to some of this AI hitting the streets?
Yeah, I believe that 2023 for us is the transitionary year for moving into that type of technology, as you'll see more people adopting it in 2024.
All right, Marwan, so what do I do now? So the reality is it's still somewhat manual or significantly manual, but changes on the way. In the meantime, when we think about success and we think about successful tactics and how they ladder up to a strategy that works over the course of the back half of this year, the front half of next year, maybe a little bit longer, what tends to be your top of mind recommendations, steps, tactics, advice that a marketing team that's succeeding at this right now tends to be doing first and frequently when it comes to connected TV and hitting this balance of quality, speed to market, shelf life? Those are important things. Mm-hmm. What do you see a successful team doing right now, and what should other teams learn from them?
Well, you might or might not be surprised by my answer. I think that the biggest tactic for any marketing team right now is to look at the amount of spend that they're pouring into linear, depending on how much they're still using in linear television, meaning it's not on connected television, not on streaming. It's still addressing the people who haven't yet cut the cord or cut the cable, so to speak. We call them cable cutters, and that term is kind of already getting tired at this point. But it's the fact that they need to embrace. The tactic is to actually move that media budget into connected television. There's a saying that goes that the typical marketer spending millions of dollars a year if you're looking at enterprise, or millions of dollars even a month if you're looking at large enterprise customers, somehow know that if they're still advertising in linear television, they know that half their budget is going to waste. They just don't know what half is the saying. Mm-hmm. And that's because of the transparency, or should I say the lack of transparency in all of the digital footprint that CTV gives you. So the lack of transparency that you see in linear television that is all given to you by connected television. Because in connected television, you actually have the IP footprint. The ultimate tactic here, the most important one, would be to take a substantial portion of that media budget and move it into connected television, because that is where, as a performance marketer, you are going to know what dials to move, what tactics to change on your own, depending on how well certain creative is working, depending on how well certain audiences are working, depending on how well certain networks are performing for you. So the idea that you would move your money into a channel that would literally tell you what the order ID level, so down to the order ID level effectively, what the cart value is against a certain network. So do you want to know whether BBC America is performing better than Home and Garden Television? And yes, you do. And that makes you, that forces better decisions. And that truly is, in a simplistic way, like the most important decision, I think, especially now, as CTV is blowing up. This is the most important decision that anybody can do, which is not to really wait and keep most of that dollar spend in, say, paid search, which for many companies, paid search is sort of like a machine that just requires more and more money and delivers the same performance. In other words, performance plateaus after a certain while. And that's not necessarily what you see in television. So the idea that they would shift budget in media to a transparent channel so they can understand fully optimize their performance metrics as performance marketers is the most important decision and tactic they could do in 2023 if they hadn't already started doing that in 2022.
That's what we're recommending
Yeah.
to do. Any parameters or guardrails, any signposts that you say, watch out for these, this seems like a step for cutting a corner, it's really about cutting quality. Anything like that out there that you see that tends to be the repeat offender that you'd say be careful of those
Well,
things.
I think one of the repeat offenders is people confuse television advertising with video advertising. Those aren't necessarily the same things. So video advertising means you're all over the web. You're doing pre-roll, interstitial, you're doing post-roll. You're in YouTube, which is also a very effective channel for some people, for some brands. But I think the idea that you would transition into moving your media budget into a channel where you have unskippable premium inventory, which oftentimes we've referred to as living room quality inventory, where you're on, for instance, Roku, Fire Stick, Apple TV, Xbox, PlayStation, and you're using any type of a device that's showcasing app-based premium programming. You're now in a world where you have a completion rate that's near 100% for viewability on a television ad, and it's non-skippable inventory. And so there's a distinction to be made. And I think one of the pitfalls is that brands who can afford to spend more money moving into, say, living room quality type inventory will spend a lot of time thinking that if they go for cheaper inventory across the web, right, that they'll actually see good performance results because, hey, it's video. That's not necessarily the case, because oftentimes you have issues with guaranteed viewability, completion rates, where it shows, when it shows, sort of like the revolver effect where the video ads are being sequenced and your viewer doesn't really even see them by the time they've moved on from the page they're at. And so you have a lot of quality issues with that inventory, albeit it's less expensive than sort of advertising in a premium environment. We address that with this idea that you start to really get scale with the brands and advertisers you have in your client portfolio that generate that raise the tide, so to speak, for all boats. But when I say raising the tide, I'm actually talking about lowering the cost of inventory in premium networks, because volume gives you the scale and the buying power to bring down the overall cost to advertise, which makes budget minimums more accessible for brands that, for instance, can't go in and start spending $50,000 a month just to get into a premium television advertising network. So that hopefully kind of expounds a little bit on the question itself and kind of introduces this concept that scale and sort of a flywheel approach to, build better inventory, bring more people into that inventory, make the inventory more cost effective and more accessible to other companies, thereby allowing other companies to come in and access the channel is kind of the strategy. And there's few companies that will be large enough that have the scale to do that, but it's something we, for instance, have been working on since day one.
Well, let's talk about things that we're working on because you sit in a particular chair. I always think the chief product officer at a company has an
Yeah.
interesting tension built into their
Yeah.
role. So, Marwan, you have to look at like the promise, and then you have to also bolt the things together to make the promise manifest, right? Like,
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
it's in your interest to both tell people, hey, there's something great coming in 2023. But then you also have to say, and we just need to do these five things to get there. And I wonder when we were talking earlier, I asked you, like, how big a change are we talking about? This was before we started talking on
Hmm.
the screen here. And you
Hmm.
used the phrase a generational leap. Do you mean that? And if so, what does that mean? What does a generational leap look like? Is it coming in 2023 or 24? And what do we mean if we say that when it comes to the connected TV space?
I think it is coming in 2023/2024. The leap, and I think that this goes for the industry at large in terms of the technologies that are currently being developed that can be utilized by different industries like advertising, and ad tech in general. But our focus really is on the entire notion of taking television advertising, making it more accessible, speeding up the go-to-market time with automating the video production process and crowdsourcing it, making television ads contextual, thereby giving them more shelf life, making the television advertising format more translucent, meaning less invasive, more passive. You can ask anyone out there right now what they hate most about watching television if it's not in an advertising free model, if it's running in some kind of a limited ad supported model, and they'll tell you it's coming to the most important part of their programming, which they consider to be their favorite show, and having to wait 3 to 5 minutes to go through a bunch of television ads. Now, that's the Achilles heel of television advertising that everybody would seek to fix. It's definitely something we're working on. In other words, make the ad viewing experience less invasive. The other one is bringing even more transparency to the entire, attribution story, which is really showing individuals, which we do now already, by the way, which is showing individuals at large, like what the storyline is of the viewer that's interacted with these ads. Okay, meaning what did they see first? What did they see next? Why did they act after they saw the second ad? And creating more ad formats and more creative formats. That will be a very important process because you already have the television channel, you already have the display channel, and then you have the advertiser's channel itself where many things can happen post viewing. And you have an opportunity to optimize and customize content on an advertiser's site post viewing so that people can actually engage more or be pulled in closer to the brand. Sort of lastly, but not least at all, is there's this notion that television advertising requires, and it would be a well-informed notion, that television advertising requires a lot of planning, a lot of foresight, a lot of budget, a lot of decision making against, well, we better make this good because we know it's only going to have a shelf life of like 60 days or so. And the important part here is there's a difference between somebody using tools to affect how they would like their campaigns to run, for instance, and around what important dates they would like them to run. And there's another notion that the creative itself should be aware of what's happening in the world, what's happening in the news media, what's happening with weather, what's happening with sports scores, what's happening with all these things, so that it can make automated decisions for the marketer that the marketer would probably make anyway, but certainly wouldn't want to manage across 15 to 20 different campaigns they have running at the same time. So it becomes part of the optimization story. There was a car, people drove their own cars. Then self-driving vehicles were a thing. Automation was a thing. There was different levels of automation. We're teetering between 4 and 5 right now. And 5 will be incredible because your car will literally become sort of your personal robot that does things for you. So it'll first drop you off at the grocery store and then go pick up your dry cleaning for you in the drive-up window and then come back for you at the grocery store to pick you up. And so again, until we can get cars to go into the grocery store and shop for us, wouldn't that be nice? But that'll be solved for. Again, so we have this concept of marketing decisions becoming automated. These are sort of the leaps that television advertising is going to take, because it is such a sort of you could call it sort of a high risk medium for many people. You're investing a lot of money to see how well it does, right? And you're learning how well it does after you've launched your television campaign. We're working on ways to predict how well it's going to be before you've even applied the budget to it and before you've even thrown it into the television channel. That's something every marketer can embrace. And I think every marketer would want to know, which is the confidence and sort of the in understanding like how well something's going to perform before they even launch the campaign. So there's technologies that are enabling those kinds of things, those needs and those wants. And the other thing that's happening that goes without mentioning is that you have this sort of automation happening within ecosystems, automated verification services. Like the minute you create a new campaign, all the platforms that you're using to verify performance and whatnot are automatically going to receive the same performance data. So these are things that are being worked on that help especially larger brands that are constantly having to work with gosh knows how many relationships and partners in order to enable those types of ecosystem capabilities that will all be automated, especially around television. So television's coming of age, and it's going to see, it's already starting to see automation. The automation that's already available now, which is something we've worked on for a long time, and it's something that's part of our value proposition at Mountain, is the idea that we're constantly optimizing through AI how a budget gets spent against an ad, when the ad gets shown and doesn't get shown. So that automation technology is already out there. It's already being utilized. We're working on it. We're evolving it. It's not a secret for us that we already have it. It's part of our secret sauce for success, and we know others are going to be embracing it as well.
Wow. From coming of age to entering a new age.
Yes.
And it's exciting times. I'm so glad that you could join us today, Marwan. We're out of time for this session, but we're going to get back together, I know, in the months to come, and we're going to see how this proceeds. Because one thing I can say about any transformation of technology that I've lived through, it's that the people that are working with it do things that are really successful and do things that are really challenging. And this kind of conversation, we hope, helps pave some of the roads and make it clear on how to get to the good stuff and steer away from the risky and rough stuff. So Marwan Soghaier, Chief Product Officer at Mountain, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to kick it back to the next session. Thanks for joining us on the forum today, and we'll see you next time, Marwan.
Thank you, James. I appreciate it. Keep your hat on. It's going to be a wild ride. Take care.